Let me tell you something that surprises people when they find out I run a hospitality business. I'm an introvert. Not the shy kind necessarily. I can hold my own at a party pretty well, but I'm the kind who finds people genuinely wonderful and genuinely tiring. The kind who needs a quiet house and a closed door for a few days to recharge. And I really do. I get downtime seriously. And I run 4 short-term rentals, which is a people business. I take care of strangers for a living, and I love it. So if you've ever thought you're too quiet or too private or too much of a homebody to do this, stay with me for a minute because I think it's actually to your advantage sometimes. When I first started, I worried about exactly this. Hospitality wasn't necessarily my thing. It sounded exhausting. It sounded like it belonged to the always warm, always bubbly, always on people, those ones who greet you at the door with a plate of cookies when you move into the neighborhood. That has just never been me, and it never will be. I braced myself for having to perform a version of myself that I just didn't have the energy to keep up all the time. But then I discovered something that honestly changed how I think about this whole business. The best hospitality I have ever received in my life at a short term rental wasn't a person hovering nearby asking if I needed something. It was walking into the space that had clearly been thought about ahead of time, a place where someone, long before I ever arrived, had quietly asked themselves, what might I need, and made sure it was there. That's the whole secret. You're not hosting in person, you're hosting in advance. It isn't socializing, it's design. And it turns out I'm really good at that. Think about the best dinner party that you've ever thrown or been to. The warmth of that night probably didn't come from how on the host was while everyone was there. It came from the menu planned and the table set and the prep and the gathering of people so that by the time everyone arrived, the host could relax and enjoy themselves. That exact skill is what makes a great short term rental. The warmth in my homes doesn't come from me being present, it comes from me having cared in advance. The extra blanket folded at the foot of the bed, the little basket of things that people always forget, the coffee bar set up and ready with coffee pods, the labels on the remotes so everything just works. By the time a guest walks in, the hosting is already done, and I got to do all of it on my own terms in an empty house with the radio on and nobody to perform for. For an introvert, that's not a workaround, that's a gift. I didn't invent this, I absorbed it my whole life from both my parents. My dad's love language was always the meal. Not just the meal, actually, but the setup for the meal. He was happiest in that quiet hour before everyone gathered. He loved to get the grill going and lay things out and make sure everything was in its place. There was enough of everything, arranging the space so that when we all finally sat down for that Thanksgiving meal, it just worked. He did the caring in advance. And then he got to enjoy the gathering without scrambling because he had already handled it. My mom taught me the same thing in a different way. She always said the most important part of the gathering was the gathering. So she did all the work before anyone had arrived, got the food done and the bar set out so that all she had to do was enjoy her friends. That was her big thing. And here's the part that gets me. I now watch the same thing happen one generation down. I set a table in one of my homes the way my mom taught me. I plan a space the way my dad taught me. And then the people I love most gather and get loud and happy in a room I built exactly for that. And so do my guests in spaces I'll never even be standing in with them. Now, here's the part that's genuinely good news for those of us who would rather not be on all the time, but still want to be in this business. Almost all of that caring is done in advance. It can be built once, and then it runs quietly in the background forever. This is where I'll say plainly that the introvert in me has an advantage. The operators who struggle are the ones who manage everything emotionally. They react to every message in real time. They feel every single guest interaction in their gut. They exhaust themselves trying to be personally present for everyone. The operators who thrive are usually the ones who sat down early, thought hard, and built systems so good that the warmth gets delivered whether they're feeling social that day or not. It needs to happen anyway. A thoughtful, automated message that reaches the guests at exactly the right moment shows attentiveness to them. The check-in details right when they arrive, the Wi-Fi password on time, all of those messages feel personal, and they exist because I wrote them a long time ago. The misconception I most want to correct is that a guest never has to chase me down, never has to feel like they're imposing. That is the hospitality. I don't think you have to meet the people in real time. If you're like me, this is going to be a relief. The joy comes later and quietly. It comes when I read a review that says everything was so easy, or you could tell so much thought went into this place, or we didn't want to leave. And I get those all the time. I'll be honest, I'm still genuinely surprised every time I read one that says Sandy was such a great host, because I wasn't even there and I didn't do much. For an introvert, that might be the purest form of hospitality there is. I care so much about my guests being comfortable and happy. I truly do. I've just found a way to show it that doesn't run me into the ground. And I'll tell you where the joy stops being quiet and gets loud. It's when the family around the table is mine. When my son and my brother and his family are all piled into one of those homes, everybody talking over each other, a big meal coming together, a card game running way too late. The same kind of gathering my parents built for us in a house that also happens to pay for itself. Let me be clear-eyed for a second, because this is still a business. Everything I just described, the caring in advance, the systems, the thought, it isn't just sentiment, it's strategy. It determines how often you're booked, how much your guests will pay, how forgiving they are when something small goes wrong, and how many of them come back or tell a friend. A warm, well thought out home beats a flashier, hollow one every single time. I genuinely believe my 5-star reviews trace straight back to this, and it's why I make more than my competitors. People can feel it when the place was built by someone who wanted them to enjoy it. And those 5-star reviews, they're making me real money. So joy, it turns out, can make you more money too. So if you've been sitting there thinking that you're too quiet or too private to run a hospitality business, I just want you to put that fear to rest. You do not need to be the cookies at the door host. You need to be the one who cared enough in advance to set the table right. If you want to see how I actually build those systems, the one that let an introvert run 4 properties in 5 to 10 hours a week across 4 states, I put together a free webinar that walks through that in some detail, and it's at strjumpstart.com, linked below. And if you're a fellow introvert who just felt a little seen, subscribe and stick around, because I make videos about doing this business the quiet, thoughtful, numbers first way. I'd love to have you here. I'll see you in the next one.